Hey folks, how's it going? There's a banking crisis coming that's going to make 2008-2009 look extremely insignificant. But before I get into all that, I'd like to ask you to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't. The thumbs up, they really help. They help with the algorithm. They help with people finding my videos. It helps with the shadow banning and the censoring that goes on here on YouTube. So if you can do all that, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. I want to talk about the coming banking crisis, and I've talked about this before. It's one of my, I wouldn't say favorite, but it's one of my most common subjects on this channel because of how important it is and because of how much it will impact everybody. Let's talk about deposit flight for one. Deposit flight, it's money being pulled out of banks. It's just another way of saying a bank run. It's people pulling their money out of their banks or not depositing their money in general. And to stress this fact, what I'm about to tell you, this is a global phenomenon. This is not just the U.S. This is happening around the world. Global banks suffer 1.55 trillion in deposit flight in 1 year. Okay, so this is big money. This is wealthy clients of major banks like JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citibank, etc. Again, these are hedge fund managers, billionaires. These are people with inside knowledge of the system. Wealthy people that really know what they're doing when they're investing their money. They're actively pulling their money out because they know what's coming. They know what the problems are with the system, and they know what's coming. And the money that's being pulled out, this is 1.55 trillion in deposits flight in 1 year. That's a ridiculously fast pace, and if you judge it based on dollar amounts, it's bigger than 2008, and it's actually the largest bank run in U.S. history. According to the Federal Reserve of St. Louis, the U.S. banks have faced $605 billion in deposit flight just in the past year. That's just in the U.S., though. That's not the global issue. If you add in France, Germany, Spain, Nordic regions, their deposits have dropped by about $950 billion in 12 months, according to data from S&P Global Market Intelligence. Okay, so it's hitting globally harder than it is here, but if you also consider the size of the economy and what have you, that's multiple countries totaling 950 billion, whereas the U.S. alone has totaled 605 billion. And it's getting worse. It's continuing to increase. But this isn't just hitting the larger banks. It's not just hitting JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Citibank, Bank of America, what have you. It's hitting a lot of the smaller regional banks too. Smaller bank deposits have plunged in the last couple of weeks by about 70 billion to the lowest level seen since May 2023. 70 billion might not seem like much to a bank like JP Morgan, but for small banks it's devastating, and I fully expect it's going to result in many more small bank failures, like what we saw at the beginning of this year. Again, the wealthy, the smart people, they know the system. They understand the system. They understand how it works. They see what's coming. They're getting ready for it. The regulators see this too, because the Fed and the banking regulators are pushing banks, or forcing banks, I should say, to hold on to more capital for better liquidity. And if you understand the banking system, for every $100,000 a bank gets in deposits, they loan out 90,000 of it. They invest it in investments, they loan it out in loans, buy bonds, things like that. And a lot of the times they buy really low quality investments or high risk investments where there's a high chance of losing money, because they have to turn that money around fast and they're trying to do it quickly. But doing investments like that quickly, you run at a higher risk, so you have a greater chance of a large loss. So to offset that, the Fed is wanting banks to hold a larger amount of capital on hand. But that's less money that they can loan out and invest, trying to earn money off of your deposits. So in the second quarter of 2020, you can look at charts and see how deposits skyrocketed back during the pandemic. And the reason there's two main reasons why deposits skyrocketed. One is the government was just printing checks like crazy, sending them out to everybody for everything. On top of that, people had stopped paying mortgages because of the mortgage freeze. And people had stopped paying on their student loan debts because of that freeze, and because they were asking the government for bailouts of their student loans. So all of that money was going into the banks instead of going on the bills. Second to that, I'm reading through my notes here. Second to that, the Fed also created an emergency bank funding program in March 2023 of this year, which helped stabilize the banking system after the first 4 bank failures this year. Let's be honest, it's a bailout program. They were bailing out the banks. This program is where banks that are really tight on money, they can go to this program, they can borrow money, and I'm talking about billions of dollars, to fund their expenses to keep them afloat. The problem is that money it's short-term loans. It's due to be paid back within 6 months. All right. If you look at the charts, though, you can see week after week, that window, banks are going there borrowing money at record numbers week after week. I think the tune so far is $107 billion has been borrowed from this bailout program. Again, that's a short-term loan. It's supposed to be paid back within 6 months. So all that money's got to be paid back, or that is going to have to be extended by the government somehow. On top of the fact that the government is requiring the banks to hold more cash, they've invested heavily in really poor investments, loans to people that can't afford to pay the loans, low quality bonds with high yield turnaround. These banks are going to be facing, within 6 months to a year, these banks are going to be facing some serious problems. The only solution to that is for banks to cut costs. They see this coming, they know it's going to happen, and to try to stave off the emergency, they're going to cut costs. There's only one way they can do that: close branches, lay off employees. So already we've seen multiple branches close from multiple banks this year. JP Morgan Chase has closed banks, Wells Fargo, Santander, Bank of America. There's a lot of others. I've got links to a bunch of these articles down below. I think the total so far for this year is we're up to around 1,000 to 1,200 banks. We're probably going to see as many as 2,000, maybe even 2,500 branches close between now and next year, or now and the end of next year, I should say. Here's the thing, with all of these articles, they're spinning this like it's due to people going online using digital services. I lost my train of thought there for a minute. Sorry about that. There's media and banks are spinning this like the entire emergency is because everybody is going digital, and there's less traffic in brick and mortar stores or businesses, and therefore they're having to reinvent or revamp their whole business model to try to take care of the new way that their customers are wanting to do business. So again, they're trying to lay it all on the fault of the customer wanting to do online banking, apps, digital services, what have you, while not covering all of these other issues that are actually the root cause of the problem. So they have to cut expenses. They have to close these branches. And I'm missing half my notes here. I'm not sure how that happened. All right, so other issues that arise with that is with them moving to a more digital system. There's a lot of problems that start to rise up. I'm trying to figure out the best way to put this. You've got a lot of technical issues. You've got bank deposits not showing up in people's accounts, transactions not showing up. Wells Fargo alone over the past 2 months has had major issues with transactions not showing up, deposits not showing up, and even their debit cards not reading at checkouts in grocery stores and Walmart, what have you. So they've had multiple problems with technical issues and their digital services. So when you stop and consider that, the more that they move to a digital platform, digital service, away from a brick and mortar service, you're going to see more of a load on the system as more people switch to digital banking. That bigger load, that greater load, is going to lead to more technical failures, more technical issues that they have to deal with. Now, consider the environment we're in globally. We're in a digital age, obviously, where hackers are rampant, hacking everything nonstop. You've got ransomware, major businesses being hacked and not being able to access their own systems. Then you've got these wars going on, geopolitical tensions between all these different countries. And one of the weapons of war that's going to be used by all these countries, it's actually being used now, is cyber warfare. What better way to cripple an enemy than cyber attacks? You know, why launch nukes or even conventional missiles when you can attack them digitally and cripple their infrastructure, bring down their economic system? So cyber warfare is a real thing, and it's a real threat. You got hackers, whether they're simply trying to make money off of people suffering or whether it's terrorists, what have you. You've got all of these challenges. And then you consider also the fact that the talk of a digital dollar, which will be coming, the government's recently announced that they're looking into it, but they're not really considering one yet. It'll probably be several years. The way the article that I saw read, and I don't have a link to it here, but the way the article I saw read, they were basically saying they're looking at it, but they're not seriously considering it right now. It will be many, many years down the road before they even adopt a digital currency. At the same time, every other country around the world is already developing a digital currency. So either our government is completely incompetent, which, I tend to think that anyway, but either they're not really considering it necessary and they're putting it off so far that we will be the last country on the planet to switch to a digital currency, or they're lying and trying to make people think that everything's fine while they're actively working on building a digital currency. The problem with the digital currency, though, especially given the current banking crisis that's building up and the threats to a digital banking system, for the government, they want this because it's easier to track you. It's easier to track every transaction, tax every transaction relentlessly, and if you start speaking out about things, start speaking in a way that's not compliant with the current political narrative, or not socially acceptable at the time, they can simply cut off all your funds where you don't have access to anything. I've mentioned this before. It'll go along with social credit scores, where we've already seen instances of the government shutting down people's money or freezing people's bank accounts because they were protesting and the government didn't like it. We've seen that with the Freedom Convoy up in Canada. I believe we saw some cases of it with January 6th, and then there's been other instances of it. If you get too politically outspoken on channels like YouTube or Facebook, what have you, right now, they will censor you. They will ban you from your account. It could potentially be that at some point in the future, if you say the wrong thing on YouTube or say the wrong thing on Facebook or what have you, that they'll not only shut down your account, but they'll shut down your bank account until you go through some sort of government retraining program, socially acceptable retraining program. There's no end to what they can do to you once they have a digital currency, because they'll have complete control, whereas they don't have that right now. And it's one thing that they hate. A digital currency would give them complete control, and a digital currency would be the death of freedom as we know it. So it's my belief that that is coming, and those are many reasons why they would like to do that. But it's also all the reasons why it would be a threat to your freedom and your security. A lot of people talk about having cash. Well, cash eventually will be phased out, and cash only has the value that people put in it based on the government. Once the government gets rid of cash, these dollar bills, it's basically just paper. Nobody's going to want to trade paper that has no real value. So what we'll be looking at then is, okay, if they lock down our digital accounts and we have no cash, we'll still have to pay bills. We'll still have to buy things. Well, what's the solution to that? You're not going to get away from a digital currency completely. There's no way around it. When it happens, it's going to happen. You're not going to be able to completely get away from it unless you're completely off-grid and 100% self-sufficient. The best solution for you is to develop a multifaceted or diverse system. You're going to be stuck with a digital currency once it switches over. Cash will have no value. That's why a lot of people talk about gold and silver. Buying gold and silver, so that they can use it as a means of barter, as a means of trade, much like dollar bills and coins are now. And that will hold some value, that will work in some cases. A lot of people say, well, you can't eat gold and you can't eat silver. Well, no, you can't. But gold and silver has been used for thousands of years for transactions, for money. Because you can carry a small amount of gold or silver in place of hundreds of pounds of produce or product. So it makes transactions easier when you're talking about large amounts of things or bulk items. But also, in this type of situation that we're discussing here, the banking system's still going to be running. It's going to be digital, though. Your bills are still going to be due. You can't exactly take dehydrated potatoes or rice, cans of tuna, what have you, and go pay your mortgage, go pay your light bill, go pay your health insurance, your auto insurance. You're not going to be able to do that. But what you can do is you can take gold or silver and trade it for those things that you need, that you can't trade other goods like food and materials for. There's a lot of people now that they'll call somebody to do some work on their house and they'll pay them in gold coin. That is actually happening now. You'll buy something from somebody, you'll pay them in a little bit of silver. It's not as common as I would like, but it's more common than you would think. And as we move more to a digital dollar, you're going to see this type of thing happen more often. Now, I'm not going to be able to go to somebody and say, hey, can you build me a new deck and I'll give you 10 bags of rice. That's not going to work. Now, you might be able to find somebody, well, look, I have all this livestock. I raise cattle. I can give you X amount of meat if you'll build me this deck. That might be more doable, but people are going to be far more willing to trade services for gold and silver. And in that case, what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to trade your services also for gold and silver. So gold and silver coins will form a form of currency of sorts, which can also be supplemented with trade with goods like rice, flour, meat, things you grow, vegetables, produce, fruits. You're not going to be able to barter everything, and you're never going to be able to store enough of an item like cigarettes or alcohol or whatever, because that's what a lot of people talk about. You're not going to be able to store enough of that to trade and barter with constantly. But gold and silver, if you invest in it, if you have the means, that can be an easier mode of transactions. And I believe that will become necessary. And we should actually start building those relationships, building that system now before our government tries to switch us to a digital dollar. Because again, as I said, a digital currency will be the death of freedom as you know it. And you need to prepare for that any way you can. Like everything else, like any good financial advisor will tell you, your investments you need to diversify. Well, just like your retirement account or your 401k or your brokerage account, you don't need to invest all in one thing. You need to spread them out in different areas so that if one goes down, others will still be profitable. You won't lose all your money at one time. The same thing goes for prepping, folks. You don't want to put all your money into just barterable goods that you think somebody will have need for. I know a lot of people that they stack and stack and stack alcohol and cigarettes. Well, not everybody's going to want that. There's going to be a need for alcohol, possibly. You've got obviously the social use of it, people drinking. There's a lot of people out there that love to drink. I'm not one of them. But you also got a practical use for certain types of alcohol. Some of it can be used to sterilize. Some of it can be used to make tinctures, using herbal medicines. So there is practical applications for some of that alcohol too. Cigarettes, unless you have that habit, nobody's going to want that. And I know that's being kind of focusing on those two items, but why invest all your money into things like that? You want to spread your money out into multiple areas, and one of those assets that could benefit you, and I believe will benefit you, is gold and silver. So don't get stuck in this train of thought that I see so many preppers have, that, well, just because you can't eat it, it does you no good. I see so many people stacking so much stuff that you can't eat. Look at ammo, for example. People stack tens of thousands of rounds of ammo. You can't eat it. Sure, you can go hunting with it, but as we've learned during the Great Depression, when things got really tight, everybody started hunting. Game nearly got played out. It got harder and harder to find food. Deer became scarce, squirrels became scarce. So that will only help you to a certain amount. And yes, you can use it to defend yourself and your supplies, your preps, but you spend so much energy and money and time building up an item that can only be used in a couple of ways, and then you turn around and you look at this other item that can only be used in a couple of ways, and you say, oh, well, that's useless. You discount it because of a prejudice against it, because you're not familiar with it, because you don't understand it, or for whatever reason you have. So just what I'm trying to say is, my advice is, don't completely dismiss a potential prep or asset because you can't see how it could be used in a very, very specific situation. Most people think of, when I talk about gold and silver, or when anybody talks about gold and silver, that, oh, when we're in a Mad Max situation, nobody's going to want it. Well, no, when you're after, like, the days immediately following Hurricane Katrina, or a total grid down, end of the world Mad Max type scenario, sure, gold and silver is not going to have no value. But historically, if you look back, anytime a civilization rises and falls, in between those civilizations rising and falling, trade has continued. And a lot of times it's been trading item for item, bread or flour, wheat, what have you, for meat or fish or fruit, whatever. But at some point, as civilization started rebuilding back, gold and silver always regained its value. And I believe it always will. So gold and silver, yeah, that's an option for a currency after a digital currency takes over, after the death of cash. This paper money we use today, that everybody sets so much store by, it only has value because the government places value on it, and it says on there it's legal tender for all debts, public and private. Once the government no longer values that, once the government will no longer accept that, do you think anybody else around here is going to trade 5 pounds of venison for a stack of colored paper? No. They're going to want something that actually has some sort of intrinsic value, be that gold and silver or another item of equal value, like cornmeal or dried fruits or eggs, things like that. The key to gold and silver is that it does have some intrinsic value, even when people aren't using it as currency. Otherwise, we wouldn't be buying it now. And let me explain something to you that I meant to include in my notes and I completely forgot about. The banking system, the governments know what's coming, and they know the death of the dollar is on the horizon. Whether it happens in the next couple of years or not, I don't know. But they do know that with our rising debt and with our careless spending and our printing of money, devaluation of our own currency, they see the writing is on the wall for the supremacy of the U.S. dollar. And I've had people lash out at me about spreading BS about the dollar will never lose its value. If you think that, you're misguided, because it will happen eventually. All fiat currency goes to zero at some point. But just to show you that banks see this coming, over the past 5 to 10 years, central banks in various countries have started buying gold. And I'm not talking about a little gold here and a little gold there. I'm talking about tons of gold. 30, 40, 60, 70 metric tons of gold. And sometimes each month or every 2 or 3 months. China is right now the largest purchaser. China's central bank is the largest purchaser of gold, gold bullion in the world. Russia has been investing heavily in gold bullion. England is doing it. France. Every country is doing it. The U.S., I don't know the numbers offhand. I haven't looked that up. I don't know if we're actually actively buying gold or not right now. My thinking is with the administration we have, probably not. But if all of these other countries are buying gold like the end of the world is coming, maybe, just maybe, that should make you rethink your position on gold and silver if you've been against it so far. Another thing that might make you want to reconsider is gold and silver have historically been tied together so that they pace fiat currencies fairly equally. But right now, gold far outpaces silver in terms of value. Silver is extremely undervalued currently, and therefore it's cheap. It's probably one of the cheapest preps you could get right now, aside from food or water. So again, that's my views. That's my opinion. You have to figure out what's right for you, but it really irks me when people say you can't eat gold and silver because there's so many other preps I see preppers stacking that you can't eat. But they stack them because they fill a purpose. They fill a need, and gold and silver does the same. It has its place. It's not a end-all, be-all, fix-all prep, but it has its place like everything else. Okay, so this video's run really, really long. I apologize for that. I'm going to end this here. But again, like, share, subscribe if you haven't. I appreciate you guys doing that. And keep prepping, folks. We are on the cusp of a very serious financial crisis. Whether that crisis is used to usher in the digital currency, I don't know. I would suspect that would be the time that they would do it. It would make sense to me, but again, I'm not a financial expert. I'm just your average guy trying to see the patterns of what's going on and trying to understand what's happening, what is coming down the line, and how best to prep for it. So, again, I appreciate you watching. Take care. Keep prepping. Don't get complacent. Stay safe in this crazy, crazy world. And until next time, folks, I'll catch you later.